Before we get to practicing vagal breathing, just a little word of warning. If you are operating heavy machinery or driving, please do not practice the vagal breathing right now. Just wait until you are in a safe place before practicing this. All right, let's begin. Hello and welcome to Light Warrior Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Kan, author of the #1 best-selling book, Sensitivity is Your Superpower, How to Harness Your Gifts, Fulfill Your Purpose, and Create a Life of Joy. And if you are a sensitive soul and you would like to have my free gift, the Sensitive Soul Empowerment Guide, you can go to sensitivesoulguide.com. And it's the 3 ways of navigating your way to more peace, positivity, and personal power, because us sensitive souls could need some support from time to time. And today our special guest is Richard L. Haight, and I'm really excited to have him on the show today. It's been a wild number of months that I've been thinking about it, ruminating about it, and then finally we are able to connect because what he teaches is super, super important, I feel, because of course I feel it's very aligned to what I teach as well, which is why I resonate so much with this work. We're going to be talking about one of his several books. So he's the best-selling author of multiple books, including The Unbound Soul, The Warrior's Meditation, which we're talking about today, Unshakable Awareness, and The Genesis Code. He's a master-level instructor of martial meditation and healing arts. He began formal martial arts training at the age of 12 and moved to Japan at the age of 24 to pursue advanced training with the Masters of the Sword, Staff, and, oh boy, Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Should have practiced that one. So he's been awarded master's licenses in 4 samurai arts, the only person I have ever met that has done that, which is pretty amazing, and a traditional healing art called Sotai Bo. Richard is one of the world's foremost experts in the traditional Japanese martial arts. Through his books, his meditation, martial arts seminars, Richard is helping to ignite a worldwide movement for personal transformation that is free of all constraints and open to anyone at any level. And what I really loved about when I first started reading the book was because I have this thing, and many people that have followed me know this, is that I was never good at or a fan of, having to sit there for 40 minutes, 60 minutes going on. Now I'm meditating, right? And even my spiritual teacher used to say, 20, 30 years ago, Dr. Karen, just take 10 minutes out of your time to meditate. Well, I couldn't even do that, and it felt like a failure. And then I discovered Frank Kinsel's work. I discovered, wait a second, if I just tune into my body and use now I know it's called clairsentience, and feel the energy in my body, I'm completely present and in the moment. And I also practice martial arts, Kung Fu, and it is Wing Chun Kung Fu. And boy, it's super helpful to be fully present, right? And I think it's so neat that we're speaking the same language, that Richard here is talking about how, no, you don't have to sit in a pretzel. You can if you want, but you don't have to sit in a pretzel configuration with your eyes closed and, toning or mantraing, whatever, for 60 minutes at a time to get the benefits of meditation. In fact, maybe there's even a better way. So without further ado, Richard, welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Karen. It's a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. It's so cool. So this total embodiment method, this is what you describe in your Warrior's Meditation book. So first of all, what inspired you to make this, and what is it exactly?
So the Total Embodiment Method actually began when I was 12 years old. I joined a karate dojo, and the teacher would have us do a meditation for about a minute before training and about a minute at the end. So he would just say, meditate, and we'd sit cross-legged and meditate. But he never explained to me or to anybody what meditation was. And he was rather unapproachable, so I was afraid to ask. And after a few years, the curiosity built, and I eventually summoned up the courage to ask one of the senior students. And I said, well, what do we do during meditation? And he says, well, honestly, I don't know, but I just visualize the techniques. Okay, I guess I'll do that. And then I was curious what meditation was, and I knew that probably that wasn't meditation. I mean, I didn't think that that's what was probably really meant by meditation. I mean, the word is mediate, right? Meditate is that mediate is in it. So finding the center. Visualizing isn't exactly about finding the center. So I was a bit wondering about that. And then when I was 16, I was dating a girl, and she came over to my house, and we grew up on a horse ranch, and I had to take care of the horses. When I came back, I found her sitting on the washing machine in the laundry room, legs crossed, hands in the position, the traditional Buddhist kind of meditation position, and found the whole thing looked kind of odd. So I walked up to her and said, what are you doing? And she says, I'm meditating. What's meditation? Because I've always wanted to know. I grew up in a rural town and there was nobody who knew anything about meditation. And so she explained her process to me. And it kind of stuck in the back of my mind. A few weeks later, I had a horrible argument with my mother. And I was enraged. And I stormed out of the house, went up the hill behind her house. And by the time I got up to the hill, a strange thing happened. It was as if something had taken over my body and like guided it to sit in a certain spot in front of a certain eucalyptus tree. Sat cross-legged, and then a meditation sort of naturally began. It wasn't what she taught me, because by then I kind of forgotten about the specific details of it. If you don't practice it, and keep up on it, you kind of, but I don't know how long I was up there, but it was a summer evening. I went up there maybe 7, and I didn't come down till about 9:30, I would imagine. I don't know actually how long I was meditating, but at some point, me disappeared. It was as if the environment and my body was all one seamless consciousness. There was no thought whatsoever. I remember my eyes were closed. And at one point, there was this pulling feeling on my left, which was odd. But I remember the eyes opened and the head turned on its own. And there, I don't know, maybe 10 yards, and probably less than that, 5 yards or whatever, there's a coyote on the trail. It stopped and very calmly was looking at me, and our eyes met, and we just held gaze for a little while. And after maybe 30 seconds, it kind of sauntered off. No fear in its eyes. I had no fear whatsoever. It felt like we were somehow communicating. My head turned back and eyes closed, and just resumed the seamless oneness. And then at some point later, it was timeless feeling. A bobcat walked right in front of me. Again, my eyes opened. I could feel it. They walked very quietly. I didn't hear it. I just felt it. My eyes opened, and I saw it go up the tree, up that eucalyptus tree. And it just sat on the branch and looking around. It behaved as if I wasn't even there. But I'm not sure that's possible, because it's a summer evening in Southern California. So we're talking at, 80, 90 degrees. An enraged teenager with body odor that probably wafted off for a mile that any animal would have picked up on. So it's just that they weren't afraid of me.
Mm.
That's the only thing that I could come up with. But at the time, there was no thought. It wasn't a thought about how amazing any of this was. There was nothing. There was no subjective or measuring thoughts whatsoever. No thoughts whatsoever. It was just happening. And then at some point, it became dark, and my body just got up on its own and started walking down the hill. And about halfway down the hill, suddenly I came back. And then it hit me how amazing that experience was. It was like the most amazing experience I'd ever had. Like, right, waking experience.
Right.
And I thought, that must be what meditation is. That must be what meditation is. So then I spent every day trying to recapture that experience, and I never could. And I think it wasn't until I was 22, and then I had what I describe now as the isness experience. I talk about that in the book, The Unbound Soul, where essentially, I'm sure some people have experienced this, you may have as well, I don't know, where you awaken to the fundamental essence of being. And it's an intelligence that's unimaginable, a love that's unimaginable. And I was in that space for several hours. I'd broken my ankle. I was meditating to try to overcome the pain. I'd broken it in a sparring match. And during the meditation, something just opened up. And so that was the next step in my understanding of the potential of meditation. And also a complete reset of like my identity. I realized I wasn't Richard fundamentally. I wasn't any of the things I thought I was. It wasn't my experience. I wasn't my memories. There's something much deeper than that we all actually are. The foundational consciousness that usually we're not in touch with because we've been trapped in our identities. But from that point forward, I had more insight into meditation. And what I realized is I wanted to do was I wanted it to be all of my life. I want all of my life to be that way. And so how can I come up with a way of meditation that will facilitate that possibility? And ultimately, I think I was 28, no, 24. 24, I went to Japan. And my teacher, he was a master of the four samurai arts that he passed on to me. But he would do something even more startling. At the beginning of class, he'd say, Mokso, that means meditate. And it would be like 2 seconds. Mokso, wadi. So meditate, stop meditating in like 2 seconds. How is this
Wow.
possible? 2 seconds meditation.
Wow.
And I trained with him for some time. And at some point, I think this would have been around 2009 or so, maybe 4 or 5 years into my training with him. I'd gotten to a fairly high level. And I asked him, I think I told him the story of that karate training. And I asked him, you have an even more odd situation with meditation in that it's just 2 seconds. And I'm not sure, is it possible to meditate in 2 seconds, to get to that meditative state in 2 seconds? And, why did you decide on like 1 or 2 seconds? And he says, well, I didn't. That's how my teacher did it. And I said, so do you know why he did it that way? He says, no. And I honestly never really thought about it. And he says, but I think that's great homework for you, like a great research project. Maybe you could explore it. And so I was thinking about it, and it occurred to me that it's probably a remnant of original samurai training, because you have to be able to flash into a calm, clear space where you're not clinging to your identity on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to be in an instant be able to turn that clarity on, and ultimately you would, of course, want to move towards a life that's always the case. And so that became, of course, that's my hypothesis, but that then became the basis of the warrior's meditation. In that the training will take us ultimately toward what I call flash meditation, the ability to just snap it's like in a second, in 10, and you open up what I describe as spherical awareness, which is the final step of the 6 steps of the warrior's meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. And it's so true that, nowadays, and you talk about this in the book, nowadays we don't have that quote unquote need to defend ourselves like the way, that maybe in other cultures maybe still have, but the samurai is a master at being, a master of being present, because they have to be. That's how they're trained. And so it takes so many years of training to be like that. And what you're doing in this book is really distilling it down, like the essence of that, and that it's accessible now. We don't have to train necessarily for 40 years as a samurai, to have something that is going to help us every day of our lives. And if we don't do it one day, or we don't, decide or choose to, we're not going to die, generally speaking. So, there's a lot of flexibility here, and that's what's kind of exciting. Now, in the book, you talk like the differences about, the other types of meditation, and then really kind of contrasting with this. And in the book, definitely being careful of not saying that something's good or bad, like this meditation's good or this is not so good or whatever. So I think it's more about what is really useful. At least that's the way I interpreted it. I have a process I call Stillness-on-the-Fly, which is like a mini process similar to yours, where it's sort of like, in any instant of every day, you can, you could be doing the dishes, you could be running, I do find it difficulty sometimes in the middle of like, CrossFit to actually be, but working on that, to be able to just be in that state, which I think is so, so cool. So tell us about that, because some people were like, well, I already meditate. So how's this different?
Yes. And so I think you said it very, very well in that the meditations, each of the types of meditations that's available, they're formulated for specific purposes. Most meditations are formulated for religious purposes, although they diverge from the origin to some degree. Like mindfulness meditation has largely been decoupled from the original Buddhist types of meditation. But Buddhist type meditations were typically seated with eyes closed or mostly closed, for practice in a monastery or something like that, or a temple. Whereas the warrior's meditation is meant to be used on the battlefield or in daily life. So it's done with eyes open. It's done for my practice. I do it while running, while walking, while sitting, while standing, in any way possible. Because see, meditation isn't actually a mental activity. What it is you're getting in, it's like your awareness drops to more basic levels of the nervous system. They become accessible. So you actually can develop a communion with the body on a deeper level and gain much deeper awarenesses. And so the warrior's meditation is really, it's focused to be highly practical. And it's not based on the idea that the senses are the gates of illusion or something like that. So Buddhist meditations typically have the idea that the senses are what cause us to be lost. And so you meditate to turn off the senses to get clarity. And while that certainly can work, I'm not sure that the senses need to be the enemy. So my idea was that I'm not going to assume that anything that's innate to the human being is inherently wrong. That there's something morally incorrect about it. So I wanted to see how I could take meditation into all aspects of the human experience, and found that I could. Yes, it took some training and some diligence and persistence, but you can. And if you begin the practice with persistence, a lot of the benefits you will start to receive like right away. So it's very quick for a lot of people, the benefits that they get from the warrior's meditation. But it's not that they finish at that point. It's like you just keep growing through the process. I do it every day, almost constantly.
Well, well, the way we've been conditioned, at least in North America or the Western world, is there's a little bit of that perfectionistic. I need to get really, really good at it, and then it's gonna do something. And then people, when I was in a holistic medical practice, my patients would say, "Oh, Dr. Karen, I can't meditate. It's impossible. My mind is going way too fast and I cannot sit still, blah, 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 blah," right? And this is before I developed my stillness through observing internal movement. So how do you respond? Because you probably have some students possibly that might start in that headspace. So how do you respond to that?
What I typically will tell them in such a circumstance is that showing up for meditation is doing something more than just what you believe you're consciously experiencing in the meditation. So we have the abstraction layer, the mind. I also call it the daily window of perception. And it's not the only thing involved in your meditation practice, but deeper layers of the nervous system are also involved. And so you could go through meditation and still have the thoughts and whatnot that are going on and disturbances, but deeper levels of the nervous system are being reprogrammed. And so over time, things will shift. Each time that you show up for meditation, you're essentially telling your body, you're giving those deeper layers of the nervous system the message: I actually love, respect, accept, appreciate, and trust you. Like, I'm here for you. Right. It's kind of like people often ask, or it's really obvious when you do a little travel around the world, but in America, there's a lot of psychological illness, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of that is actually a result of when we were children, our parents didn't really spend much time with us, right? We might have been raised we might have been infants raised we had our own bedroom separate from our parents, right? Which is totally unnatural for a human being if we look at the evolutionary history of the human being, right? So like this fear gets impregnated into our nervous system, this feeling of aloneness. There's so many people who feel alone even in a crowded room, right? Completely unseen. It's because we as adults, we as parents, didn't give them the time. And maybe our children have behavioral problems, but maybe that's just a result of the fact that we weren't there for them when they were young. Like if you look at how indigenous people raise their children, the baby's strapped to mama from day one. Like,
Right.
just strapped to her until it's a toddler, and then they walk around with her and do it. Everything is done together.
Mm.
Everything's done together. And isn't that what our children actually want?
Mm.
Isn't that what our children actually want? And then we as adults we might wonder why our children don't respect us, and it might be because we didn't respect them.
Wow.
Right. But meditation actually helps to undo a lot of that feeling of aloneness and disconnect, because it little by little opens up deeper level of the nervous system to the awareness of the fundamental connection of beingness. Yes, you could almost look at like when an infant when a human is conceived, that moment of conception, there's no identity. There's only the experience of life directly. But as the senses develop, as the body develops, as the brain develops, the identification process develops.
Mm-hmm.
And the mind then gets trapped in self-identity, in your name. But you're not really your name. That's
Mm-hmm.
just a label, like it's like the number on your mailbox. It's for functional purposes. You're not really that. But how many people don't like their name? You know,
I was one of them.
strong emotional feelings about their name because they kind of don't like themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what
that's
it
true.
is. And so that developing embryo in, becomes a baby, a toddler, it's lost that connected feeling to that original life, to the original beingness. And so it looks to mother and father for identity and love. But if they're not spending much time with us, then we don't receive that love. And meditation is a way to reconnect with the original love. And that
Mm-hmm.
original love is actually the deepest um, level of human consciousness that we're usually not aware of. Right? But it can open up. And then we no longer have codependent relationships. We no longer depend on how people think about us. We're free in a very fundamental way, not a self-absorbed way, but in a connected.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I like that. Because the way we're programmed is like, well, I can't settle down to go into meditation, or I'm really having a bad day and I can't meditate, and there's all these reasons why people say they can't meditate, and even I was one of them.
Yeah.
I was like, ugh, I'm too busy. Ugh, there was always an excuse, but I think the part of me that didn't want to do it is because I didn't want to fail.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
didn't want to be not good at something because I had this self-esteem issue that I had to be good at everything
sure.
that
Sure.
I put my mind to. So there's all these different reasons where people, do or don't do things. And what I love about your book is it's really accessible because it's not about doing it perfectly. It's not
Yeah.
about having this particular result by this time,
Yes.
and that's great. Now, some people, if they haven't gotten your book yet, and by the way, the Warriors Meditation book, can you share where people can get that and what your website is, Richard?
Yes. So Warriors Meditation will be probably available in any online store, maybe most easily found probably on Amazon.com. My website is richardlhaight.com. And there's 30 days of free Warriors meditation training. And then if you're interested in more advanced training over and above that, that is of more of a spiritual nature. Because the Warriors meditation, as I convey it, it's just practical. It's helpful for anybody. We all have stress, right? Our days are hectic, but you can do it while you're driving. You can do it while you're on the train. You can do it while you're walking. That's you can start with all of that. Beginners can walk in it and can use it while driving and things like that. So you can get that experience in these little gaps of time, a few minutes here, a few minutes there. As you develop the experience, you can take it into ever more intensive activities. Eventually, you learn to be able to run in it, to talk in it, to work in it, to read in it, to write in it, and all of that. Eventually, it becomes just a part of it's just a part of your life, and it's no longer considered a meditation anymore. It's just you're clear.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the practice there is not about perfection. It's and not even about a specific result. Like many people are, trained to see it as that. But it's not for me, for example, if I'm in the zone, some people call it in the zone, when I'm figure skating, to be able to call on it because that's just who I am, and that's uh, every day is like that. So if I'm practicing even for seconds at a time, minutes at a time, it's accessible as opposed to me going, well, I'm going to go to meditation retreat. Not that that's wrong, because I really like those. A meditation retreat, and I'm going to do meditating 8 hours a day for 5 days straight, and then come home and do regular life and kind of forget about that. This is very, very practical because I can call on it and at any time that I desire. And whether I'm in a bad mood, whether I've had a problem that I need to solve, which of course, doing the meditation is super helpful because the ideas just drop in. I don't have to work for them and fret about them. And even if I'm anxious or worried or whatever, I go, okay, what does it feel like to be worried?
That's
and
right. You make the experience, you become conscious of the experience, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now, if could you like kind of give us a little bit of a snippet of, because some people hearing, oh, there's 6 steps. Oh, so maybe you can like allay people's potential fears about, am I going to be able to learn this?
Sure, sure. Well, the first thing I think might be helpful to explore is attitude, because as you
Mhm.
talked about, essentially perfectionism, you wanting to get it right, and the pressure that creates on the psyche will block us from being able to meditate, because we need to be able to relax into the process, certainly in the beginning. Now, later on, I teach people to do it like, under massive stress, right? We have what's called fukuro shinai. It's kind of a practice sword. I do this with some of the people that are here. The training sword that's covered with leather, and
Hmm.
you actually hit each other with it, and
Wow.
it doesn't hurt that. It doesn't cause any damage, but it does, smarts a bit and makes a big loud sound, and the nervous system clenches up. But if you've trained sufficiently and almost reprogrammed that more basic nervous system not to go into fight, flight, freeze mode under pressure, then you won't have a negative response to it, and you'll be able to pass various. I have a number of tests that
Mm.
martial arts training that would be very difficult to explain here, um, but that fundamental reprogramming is essentially part of it. But you can't just get there tonight or today or the
Right.
first time you met it. It's healthier to think of the process as a gradual movement toward harmony, a gradual movement
Mm.
toward reprogramming the basic nervous system, and that will then play into your prefrontal cortex type thinking mind, higher functioning mind, the daily window of perception. So instead of getting into like philosophy and thought and all of that to solve all your problems, a lot of the solutions to your life will just bubble up
Yes.
from bodily awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Boy, being a big thinker, I would just worry and ruminate over problems and try to solve it, would lose sleep. I mean, this is a pattern in the past and got me to burnout, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, blah, 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 all
Yeah.
that stuff before. And I've learned, okay, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And now that I can be more in the body and fully honor my body instead of seeing it as some unnecessary vehicle I wish to transcend, to fully acknowledge the body and respect the body. And like you said earlier, the senses,
Mm-hmm.
not to like not use the senses, but actually to use the senses on purpose in
Absolutely.
the Warriors
Conscious.
meditation, which is fantastic. Then I just find that things almost resolve themselves
Yes.
much faster, like synchronicities occur. I might even have a thought. I mean, I laugh about this, but I might even have a thought one day of like, I'm running out of underwear or something, right? And then all of a sudden the ad will come up and whatever. And maybe Facebook or Google's like reading my mind now, but it's but it's a synchronistic like ease of just attracting
Yes.
the right, like I'd be like, gee, I wish I could learn such and such, right? And the thought comes up, but in that mode of meditating, and then it's like the teacher shows up, or so and so knows so and so who mentioned such and such. I'm like, I've been looking for that meme, or I've been looking for that teacher, or and it's just so cool
Yeah.
when that happens. And I'm sure you get lots of that experience, happening for
Yes.
you.
Yes. Absolutely. And many students, I get letters and emails and things like that talking about such experiences that people have. But the basic steps of the Warriors, so this meditation was refined when I moved to Japan and trained with this teacher, Osaki Shizen. At some point, I got advanced, and he wanted to learn the therapy art that I was doing because he had a bad knee, and I worked on it, and it got better. He could train. He had to stop training for a while because of that knee, and then it became a kind of exchange. I taught him the therapy art, I taught him
Mm.
art, and then he taught me the martial arts, and we brought them all together in one unified training system. At that time, we were only working on the final step of the meditation, which I call spherical awareness. And I'll explain that in a bit for the audience. But when I moved back to the States, before going back, I was like, oh, how am I going to pass this on to other people? Because like the bridging method that we use to get to spherical awareness in the martial arts training is not something I could convey to anybody unless they had years of martial arts training. So it's
Right.
practical. And he said, well, what kind of meditation were you doing before we started coming up with this stuff? And well, I was just going through the senses. I was working in a warehouse, and I felt it was kind of not a very challenging job. And so I kind of thought, well, what if I just like spread my awareness out over the whole space? So like peripheral vision, and I just listened to the whole space, and it's like that kind of thing. I started to make this like ninja game because we had other workers, and so I had this game that I was playing while I was working in the warehouse, which was my job is to be aware of where everybody is at all times, and if anybody sneaks up on me, that means I was assassinated. Right? This is before I went to Japan, right? But you can clearly see the martial artist in that thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
But if I could detect them before they got to a certain distance from me, then I successfully fended off the ninja,
That's fun.
right? Yeah. So I started out with peripheral vision and like this, just like all hearing kind of intention. And then when I went to Japan, I studied Sotaiho before I met this teacher. That's a kind of physical therapy, a Japanese physical therapy. And in that training, you get an enhanced bodily awareness. So I started working more and more on that bodily awareness, and that becomes then another step of the meditation. And then I spent a lot of time in nature, and I started to notice how the sense of smell would enhance as I was out there, and that would stimulate the deeper brain. So I thought, okay, I'll incorporate that too. So I was 4 steps, And then finally I was like, okay, well, there's only one more basic sense. So it's the sense of taste. So I'll toss that in. And that's kind of how it happened. So I explained to him, that's what I was doing was this 5 senses. And he said, well, why don't you just use that? That'll be your bridge into the spherical awareness that we've been practicing. So those are the 6 steps, right?
Oh, that's neat.
And
Well,
I
I
think,
want to share with you that my husband and I have been walking the dog outside barefoot. So I'm getting, my feet are getting more and more conditioned to do that. It's getting a little chilly now, but we're still doing that. And one day we thought, well, what if we just walk backwards for part of this? We kind of know the path.
yeah,
And so we started doing that. And at first it was just really like, oh boy, right? Like there's a bump there. I wasn't expecting. And then I thought, wait a second, I can use Richard's spherical awareness.
yes,
Hello, right? And so I purposefully, as I was walking backwards, now the dog would be interesting because he'd pull here and there, but so it would take my awareness away. But the minute I could kind of, incorporate it all, it was so interesting because I could step and I noticed I'm just stepping more confidently.
yeah,
It's like I knew what was back there without seeing it, which is I'm very highly visual. So it's kind of cool that that's happening. So that's getting better and better. I just wanted to report that to you because I just thought it was so fun to be able to walk backwards and not feel like I'm going to trip on something.
yes, yes. I think it's brilliant that you do that. That's Osaka Sensei and I were just constantly trying to find new ways to challenge our awareness and our meditative training, and so that's very clever. I used to spend time like walking through the forest with my eyes closed. I don't
Yep.
recommend that for a beginner.
No.
Uh, I even recommend that for an intermediate meditator, but there are many ways to play the game. So in terms of mindset, it's helpful to actually think of meditation as almost like a game, an
Hmm.
exploration. Go into it with an exploratory state through an exploratory state rather than be too serious about it, right? Because that's
Right.
already blocked.
Right.
Right?
Instead of I have to get there,
Yes,
it's more like a child just playing for the sake of playing.
yes, yes. In fact, I used to teach the Warriors meditation to children, and what I found is that the children pick it up like super quickly. Like in one session, they can run in a meditated state.
Oh my gosh.
Once they hit puberty, all that self-consciousness begins and all that seriousness
Um,
begins, and then they're blocked, and it'll take that individual maybe weeks or months to get to a point. For adults, sometimes it might be a year. It depends on the individual and how much they practice. Oftentimes they have preconceived notions of the limitations of meditation that block them. If they
hmm.
didn't have those preconceived notions, they might be able to sprint in a meditative state within a few days or weeks, or even maybe the first session. But once we get past puberty, it's like there's a lot of blockages.
Oh
It's
man.
a very natural experience what I'm doing, and many people have sent me emails letting me know that that spherical awareness step is something that like it just naturally happened to them when they were children. They were walking along the beach, or they were, you know, walking down the road in the evening, and then suddenly boom, something opened up. And when they practiced meditation, the same thing happened. They had forgotten about the experience as children into
Oh.
meditation. Like, oh my gosh. So I think it's a natural thing, fundamentally. And if we allow our bodies to be in circumstances that would naturally bring it out, that's typically natural circumstances, like going to the beach or whatever.
Yes, nature helps a lot, and what it sounds like you're almost saying is like remembering it as opposed to learning it.
Yes, yes,
Like
yes,
how the natural way of being that we've been conditioned out of, and
yes.
like you said, the self-consciousness and all that.
There's a
I've been
fair
actually
argument.
really
There's a fair
pleased.
argument to that. That what we're really doing is just realizing something that's um, just a potentially human being and
Hmm. Hmm.
remembering something. Right?
Yeah, I was gonna give you another funny story. Sometimes, well, in the past, there were all sorts of interesting, things growing up, being thinking negative things about myself and being called a klutz and blah blah blah. So now I get kind of tickled pink a little, Richard, because I'll be walking along, and granted, I'm probably doing two things at once, but I might be holding something, thinking about something, and then at the last minute, like it's not even in my physical visual field, but I'll avoid the dog toy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the past, I would have stepped on it, hurt myself, tripped, fell, whatever, and I let last minute just like whoop, just went around it, and I went, "That's cool. No idea how that happened, but that's really cool."
Yeah, you know, people often will report that like they'll drop things and then like their hand will just reach out and catch it quicker than they could have ever thought.
Ooh, Crouching
Or
Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
even their foot will catch it. You know,
Yeah,
you become like kind of Jackie Chan or something. You know?
yeah, yeah. That's pretty cool. And well, prior to developing and hearing what you have been teaching in our martial arts, Wing Chun, I remember one of the students had said, this is many, I've done it for, I don't know, 5 years, something like that. Anyway, year three, he said, you've improved. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, what I mean is when a punch comes, you're not flinching anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, I never thought of that, but it's true. Because as a beginner, I had no sense of, is their fist going to actually hit me or not? I had no sense of that spatial awareness or experience. But after receiving 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 punches, I know exactly the distance that is safe and what is not safe,
Yes.
And so that natural flinch response of a fist coming towards me, if it's a safe distance, it's like,
Yes.
So it's kind of neat.
Only
So
experience can give you that, right?
yeah, only experience, right? We can theorize all we want, but until in this embodied experience, until we experience it, sometimes it's just that's the game, that's the practice.
You know, we as humans don't really know our potential. Yeah.
Hmm.
And things like the warrior's meditation allow us to access um, the intelligence of the body. And from my experience, it seems that the potential is far beyond uh, what we're generally accessing.
Hmm.
And that it doesn't actually take a whole lot of practice for some of those potentials to start to emerge within individuals. If they're, you know, again, if they're going through if they're um, going into the meditation through an exploratory mindset, almost as if it was a game or something like that,
Right.
um, everything gets a lot easier. And so having a little bit of a lighthearted attitude about it and not getting excited sometimes it's almost
That sometimes can be a little challenging.
yes. Sometimes I get, it's actually pretty often students will email me or readers will email me and say something like, I had this experience during the meditation where like everything just fell away and I was like one with the universe. So there was no separation, it was seamless. It was the most amazing experience of my life. And then my response back is, that's wonderful. And I'm sorry. Right. Because it's likely that the mind now will expect that the next time you go into meditation.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
might be a long time before you have an experience like that. Again, the expectation will block you from it, but you're not going to be able to turn it off.
Oh boy.
You're not going to be able to turn it off. Eventually, it'll just sort of peter out, and then you'll get back to like it's just a practice. Don't don't anticipate, don't expect. You just, you just show up for it. But it happened to me as well. I had that massive experience, and then I don't think I re-grounded for like 6 years after that.
Wow.
And it was helpful because I told this experience of being one with the universe to one of my teachers, and I'm like, it's so frustrating because I so badly want to get back to that, and all those things
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
saying to him. And he says, and I was expecting, part of the reason I was telling him, and it was egoic because I wanted to let him know that I'd been one with the totality of being. And he looks at me after, he's kind of looks over me and he says, I recommend you forget it.
Mm.
And I was like so offended. I didn't tell him I was offended. I tried to play it off as if I wasn't offended, but he was actually right. It was like I kind of gave it some thought, and and after a few days, I'm like, yeah, maybe he's right. Maybe all this stewing on it is not helpful. So whatever the experience we have in meditation, once you come back out of the meditation, which you probably will, it's not such a big deal.
Mm.
Keep it grounded. It's not such a big deal. One of the things that I tend to say to myself if my mind is getting a little bit out, or someone's going into expectation, say they had a meditation just now that was fantastic. They come to me and say, "Oh, this was amazing meditation. I had this fantastic experience." And I will say, when was that meditation? They said, it was like, I just had it a half hour ago. And I'll say, well, that was a long time ago. So I'll say, that was a long time ago. Let's move on.
Mm.
Right.
Yes, good point.
It's helpful to think of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, wow. Now let's one of the things we wanted to share with our listeners and viewers today is the vagal breathing. This is something that you had shared early on in the book, even before the 6 steps. Can you tell us what that's about, and maybe walk us through how to do that?
So vagal breathing is a tool that I use in the book because there's this awareness that I call primary awareness, and it's a bit difficult. Well, it's maybe impossible for the mind to understand it without getting the experience. If I just explain it to people, they'll think they know what I mean, but they don't have an experience with it, so they can't possibly be an accurate knowing.
Hmm.
And of course, our minds will play this game on us all the time. It's this tricky game of thinking we understand things that we actually don't have any experience with, right? And so vagal breathing is something that I was doing when I was in Japan as part of the therapy method. And it's a quick way of stimulating the vagus nerve so that your normal daily window of perception, self-oriented perspective will quiet. And then it's almost feel like your awareness sinks into the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on the individual and the time of day or whatever, there's many factors involved. For some of us, what will happen is all thought will turn off, and then we'll have this profound awareness within the body. And fundamentally, that's what I mean by vagal breathing and the primary awareness that it
Okay.
can stimulate. Now, we can stimulate that primary in the meditation. Ultimately, we're aiming to get to that primary awareness without having to take a vagal breath. The vagal breath is a tool to at least demonstrate what I mean by primary awareness. There is some danger to vagal breathing if people do it too hard. And so I want to stress that before we get into it. And if you have glaucoma or you have, some kind of heart disease or cardiac disorders or things like that, you just want to be careful not to create too much pressure in your body through the breath. And so what we're going to be doing is actually creating breath pressure that we will direct to our upper sternum in our practice here or in our play here, and hold it for as long as feels right, and then we'll just let it drop. But in fact, I'll do it one time just to let everybody kind of get a sense of what I mean, and then you might try it on your own. And what I'm going to suggest here is that young people and whatnot, you can probably take a full breath and use a lot of pressure, and that's fine. But if we've got some issues, be careful. We don't want to have a stroke or something like that. Those things are extremely rare. People can have such results from pushing too hard at the toilet, right?
Right. Yeah, Valsalva. Yeah.
It's basically a Valsalva maneuver, right? It's just that the only difference is we're going to be directing pressure to specific areas versus most salvo maneuver. It's just a generalized pressure. Makes sense. So what you do is you take a deep breath in, and then you press that. You use your body, your shoulders, everything to press that pressure right into the top of the sternum. And I kind of put my chin up and to amplify it. And now, again, if you have an issue, you'll just make a little bit lighter breath, not quite as intense. And you hold it for as long as you can, and then you just let it drop. Many people will suddenly become aware of their heartbeat. They may feel tingling all over their body. They may almost see within their body a spaciousness. Some people have sort of psychedelic-like experiences. Many times the mind becomes totally quiet. You can see that Karen's mind has become quiet. Let's do it one more time when we're ready. You want to do this seated, by the way. You could pass out if you were standing. And if you have a little time, we might do it one more time. Is that all right? Let's practice aiming it in a different place. See if we can put the pressure in a different place in the body, maybe like the diaphragm, or maybe the belly button. Play with your body movement to help accentuate the pressure in those areas. In my body, there's a very blissful, happy feeling came about. Waves of awareness. Yeah.
My hands are pulsing.
Yeah. And in all likelihood, what's all that's happening here is that the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex or the default mode network has gotten a little bit thin as blood pressure drops a little bit. And then suddenly we're aware in the body in a way that we normally aren't because our identifying process is turned off. This would not be a very good method for the samurai to do in the battlefield. Pass out. Right. So this is just a temporary method that I use to give people an example of what I mean by primary awareness. You see
Okay.
right.
Gotcha.
Meditation is where we want to go. Don't do this while driving.
Right.
I made that mistake once and almost when I almost blacked out and went off a cliff. So don't do it.
Jeez.
I didn't realize that could happen while I was in seated position, you know,
Uh,
right. But yes, so so don't make that mistake, please.
right. Well, it's very simple, and I in my mind's eye, it sort of feels like I've got a balloon with air in it, and I'm squeezing different parts of the balloon, and it's popping out, like how you make
Yeah, yeah.
animal balloons, like sort of like that. So I'll be like, ooh, I really want to pop out the balloon over here, and then maybe move here and pop out the balloon over here. So kind of intuitively moving in a way to force the air into different areas. It's kind of neat.
You can actually release a lot of tension in the body this way through directed pressure, and there's almost no place
Mm,
when you get really good at it, you can direct the pressure to anywhere in your body. Pardon
okay.
me.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool. And like you said, it's not for, the battlefield, but it's a great practice to have, oh, this is the feeling. Like
Yes.
almost the body memorizing that template. So I know you have a free vagal breathing video
Yes.
on your website. So that's Richard L. Haight, which is spelled Richard L and then HAIGHT.com
Yes.
/vagal. And on Richard's site, you'll also see other offerings as well. And then you mentioned earlier a free 30-day meditation series. You want to just share just a little bit about that before we go?
Yes. So the warrior's meditation is it's very flexible. It has to be practiced flexibly. When I wrote it in the book, I just kind of wrote because it's a book. You're pretty limited in what you can convey through a book. So I wrote it in one format, going through the senses, but in a certain order. But actually, that order should it's helpful to shift it up. So you might start with
Mm,
total visual awareness, seeing the big picture, and then you might go to total auditory awareness. You're not focusing on specific sounds, but the totality of sounds, the sense of smell and whatnot. But then the next time you do it, you might start with bodily awareness. You might
hmm
then go to taste, and you might go to so also in the 30-day training, there's a number of other things that you will learn, like how to meditate while lying down, how to go into theta meditation, which is another type of meditation. Many fun things in there. But also there's a warriors meditation like a paid course, but like half of that course is free, and that gives instruction as like that gives you like not just the how to, but why things are working the way they work.
Hmm.
Right, so you get a better sense of what's really going on.
Okay, great. And then before we started, you said you were actually doing a live training. Can you tell us a little bit about those kinds of offerings you have?
So I actually do several types of live training. Right now, we have a group here. Um, see, this training was ultimately developed through physical contact, through
Right.
martial arts context. And so the students that are here, I have a number of tests, physical tests that demonstrate to them very clearly the progress in the lower level nervous systems, the more basic brain and bodily awareness. And it's a step-by-step system. It's rather difficult to explain, but once somebody gets here and starts going through it, they'll start to realize a couple of things. One is your body is intelligent in a way that you might never have considered, and it has a type of intelligence that your thinking mind simply cannot match. It's a different type of intelligence, but um, and that ability, that awareness, then plays into your movement, so that your movement is buoyed. It will help you for your martial arts. It will help you for walking. It'll help you for like people. I've had people that they can't walk hardly anymore, but this has regained their ability to walk through this.
Hmm.
There's but the same principles that are taught through the physical training result in the ability to rebalance the body, to release inflammation, to overcome injuries and things like that. At the same time, as we become aware of that basic level of the nervous system, we start to become aware of the ways that our mind has been trapped uh, through identification. And that basic practice makes it so much more clear than you could get just by thinking about it.
Hmm.
Actually can feel yourself getting trapped by your thinking in your body. You can feel it. And
Okay.
that's really key. People often they want to overcome bad habits or their reactivity to things other people say and whatnot, and they try to think their way out of that problem. But actually, it's much more expedient and efficient to get the bodily awareness, because your body will warn you when the triggering is happening. Like I could feel my heartbeat all throughout my body anytime. And my heart will warn me. My pulse will warn me when things are going astray. Right? Feel my general nervous system, with other people usually can't unless you've done a lot of training. Your nervous system will warn you. Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting because a lot of highly sensitive people almost feel in their minds that sometimes it's a curse because they feel so much. We call it the clairsentience. They feel so much in the body that they can walk into a place and just all of a sudden have nausea or something, and they know it's not their stuff, but then they're like, well, now what do I do with this, right? Because it's like I don't really like the analogy of a canary in a coal mine, but it's sort of like the sensitives are the ones that walk in, like me at Christmas years ago, walk into a Best Buy on Boxing Day in Canada, which is the 26th of December, and had a migraine after just a few minutes,
Yes.
realizing, wait a second, this is Boxing Day. There's like 10 times more people here than normal. Everyone's got their cell phone on. There's all this electronics. I'm a highly sensitive person. What the heck am I doing in there? You
Yes.
know, um, and stuff like that. So I think that if we can learn our body signals through this practice, it can be super, super helpful, and not poo-poo them or wish they weren't there or wish you got rid of it. I know a lot of people are like, I'm too sensitive. I wish I was normal.
Yes. Through the total now, just I can first totally empathize with that experience, because that's actually how I used to be. When I was a kid, we'd go into stores and I'd get totally overwhelmed.
Yep.
I remember I could actually hear, like, almost like, most people can't hear the whirring of like computers and stuff like that. I could hear it, and it'd give me a headache when I was a kid. I never wanted to go into stores.
Yeah.
But as I was doing this martial arts training, that level of sensitivity, it can be disabling. And that's not, you can't, the idea of samurai, it actually comes from the word to serve. And you can't serve if you're disabled and overwhelmed.
Right.
So one of the aspects of the warrior's meditation is to be able to become aware of that basic nervous system, but at the same time, be able to be so centered that you're no longer imbalanced by the abundance of information. Right. And so it's a practicing of centering and grounding. And so you can almost look at the mind as electricity. If you have a current that's grounded, the electricity isn't excited. Right. It's when it's not grounded that it gets dangerous. And so
Right.
what I realized is I needed to find an efficient way of grounding. And once I did that, then that highly sensitive, the negative aspect of that awareness was no longer there. But it takes some time to get a sense for it.
Right.
That's
And
part
it's
of it.
actually, as I like to say, your superpower.
Yeah,
Now.
it will end up becoming, if you can get the balance of the ground and the center, then you can actually, there's a lot of value to it.
Yeah,
So,
that's neat.
without the minuses, that can be
Right,
very
right.
unpleasant, right?
Yeah, I always get shocked when not shocked, but pleasantly surprised when I see some of the films where the children are reading blindfold, and then there's the adult training, blindfold reading, and it's just neat. Like you said, like there's aspects of our talents, gifts, mind, what that can do. We don't even realize that we have that capability because we are never necessarily encouraged to train that part of us.
Yes. And we
But it's
may not know
absolutely
how to
possible.
train it if we were encouraged, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now, when people come, if they do come to your place for that training, how physically fit do they need to be? Because I know someone's going to ask me that question.
Oh, they don't need to be particularly physically fit, but we do. So I live out in the mountains, so you need to be able to just take basic walks and imagine like a basic hike or something like that. That's sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I
Okay.
also do like live online trainings for students who've been through some of the basic courses. They're going to have questions and need to interact with me. So we'll get together like 20 people and go. Like currently, I'm just finishing up a year-long one. It's a kind of an advanced training, but we have a step-by-step system. We've got the basic warrior meditation training. Then you've got bodily awakening and rejuvenation. It teaches you a conscious theta meditation and ways to to activate the intelligence of your body so that your body then moves on its own to resolve a lot of the issues of health issues and things like that. But the
Nice.
primary purpose of it is to awaken the intelligence of the body. If the mindset going into it is to heal the body, already we're not listening to the body. We're projecting something onto it. So if you go into it very, very respectful, it's more like making space in which the healing could occur rather than trying to heal primarily.
Right, or force the healing,
Takes
or
the
tell the
ego
body what it needs to
quality
do.
out. Yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
above
totally.
that is, of course, I call the spirit of truth. And that's where there's at the base level of human consciousness, there's something that doesn't lie. It's constantly seeing at a level that's unimaginable to most people, but it doesn't deceive. And when you get to that, then you start to see through all your nonsense, right? And so that course teaches that, but it also teaches there's also an aspect, and we've all experienced this, that deceptive spirit within us that would lie, would cheat, is looking for attention, might drop a name, I know such and such, or all that, it's the nonsense stuff that's not in alignment with reality. And that you become on a bodily level quite aware of it. So you become on an embodied level aware of that spirit of truth, and you can access it through intention to see through the nonsense. But you can also then explore the nature of that deceptive spirit, and how it plays out in the body, so that when it's kind of raising its hackles, you'll know physically, right? You could curtail a lot of the behavior that might not be so helpful, necessary, or meaningful in your life, right? But each of these levels is an enhanced level of centered, grounded fitness. So your body will get to a degree of centeredness and fitness that you can't imagine possible just hearing about it, right?
Right. It needs to be an embodied experience, and
Yes.
very helpful, as my experience has been, that to have a guide, it's one thing to read a book, and I definitely, I mean, people can get the book and start. No question. It's not rocket science, but the way you've put it together is so elegant and simplified, really,
Yes.
that I don't have to do 10 years of whatever intensive training to learn it. But if people want to go deeper, they can go deeper with
Yes.
you. So again, just for folks listening in, so you can get the book at Amazon or all the other regular online bookstores, The Warrior's Meditation, and then check out some of other books of Richard's. And then Richard's website is richardlhaight.com. So Richard L and then HAIGHT.com. So we have the 30-day free little mini course, warrior meditation, and of course the vagal breathing that we practiced today. And Richard, any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners before we end?
Yeah, sure. Most of the challenges that we're going to have in anything we do will come from taking things too personally. If you can step out of that personal and go into an exploratory state, most anything that you're going to learn um, or unlearn will be easier and more rewarding. Your relationships will get better. Everything, and especially the relationship between the mind and your own body. Oftentimes the mind is quite abusive to the body.
Yes.
and the body remembers that. And you could imagine the body almost as an animal. It has intelligence, and maybe if we wanted to access that intelligence, it will be necessary to love, respect, accept, appreciate, and ultimately develop a trusting relationship, a communion between the mind and the body. It can be achieved, and it can be achieved very rapidly. So, have a light heart about it, and exploratory, a little bit of a playfulness about the process, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it and make progress. Yeah.
Great counsel. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
And
Kevin.
yeah, just giving your value. And I want to also thank all of our light warriors and our light medicine community for tuning in and leveling up your experience of your human embodied self in this timeline and this reality. Again, thanks so much. And we'll see everyone next time on Light Warrior Radio. Lots of love. Bye for now.